I'm joined by aviation analyst, Captain Desmond Ross. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for your time. Let's talk about the pictures of the crash site on the ground. What does your expertise tell you about the evidence that's on the ground? What does it suggest happened in the air for the debris we've seen at the crash site?
Well, the debris that we can see is very scattered and broken into very small pieces. It's very, very clear that the aircraft did not touch the ground in a flat trajectory. It went straight in, basically. It's broken up in a way that obviously suggests an explosion. Now, the explosion could have occurred prior to hitting the ground or after hitting the ground. Either way you look at it, the aircraft is in very small pieces and clearly, obviously, no opportunity for anyone to have survived. Some of the photographs that I saw yesterday actually suggested to me very clearly that had it been hit by a projectile on the outside of the aircraft. You can tell by the way in which holes occur in the skin of the aircraft, and some of the stuff that is clear is that it was not an internal explosion coming out of the aircraft. It was something that impacted it from the outside, which is consistent with a missile strike.
So your analysis would be a missile strike to the external part of the plane while it was in the air?
Look, it's still speculation, but in essence, yes. Until we look, the question of the flight data recorders and the cockpit voice recorder, this is very important. The Tehran authorities are saying that they don't want to release them. There's two questions. First, do they have the necessary equipment to analyze the data that's on these recorders? Because that's not just something you buy at a local electronics store. It's quite specialized. And there's only a few countries in the world that actually have it. France is one of those countries, the UK, America, whatever. So unless Iran has this equipment tucked away somewhere, those flight data recorders need to go to a specialist laboratory for analysis. This will then tell us quite precisely what actually happened in the last few moments. The cockpit voice recorder will also tell us exactly what the pilots were saying to each other, and you will hear any noises, such as an explosion, just before it cuts off. So these need to be properly analysed.
The flight data recorders, though, or the black boxes, that's what Iran is trying to suggest, perhaps, that there's problems with them. But aren't they supposed to be almost indestructible?
Essentially, they're built for that purpose. They're built to survive a crash. They're made for that purpose. They're locked. They're not accessible to anyone under normal circumstances. Again, they have to be opened with special equipment, and they're very, very difficult to interfere with them once they've been in a crash and stopped. Unless the crash itself has caused damage, but it doesn't normally.
I just wonder, finally, very briefly, are there not questions as to why the plane was in that place, considering the contentious issues that were going on at the time?
Yes, there are. I think that's a big question that needs to be asked. If you go back to the MH17 disaster, which was over the Ukraine and was shot down by a missile, ever since that time, even before that, but particularly since that time, there's been risk assessment done on virtually every flight by the operations department of the airlines. The question here is, why did that pilot and that crew, why did they take off when the area was in fact on lockdown? There was concern by the authorities that they may be attacked in a counterstrike by the US. That information should have been made available to the crew at their briefing prior to departure. Most pilots would probably have thought to themselves, let's delay the flight for a little while and see what happens. If everything was so secretive and so that the Iranian authorities didn't want to say anything to the air crew, that becomes actually a contentious issue. The pilots are supposed to be properly briefed on the risk of conducting the flight. And in this case, I think that they should have been given some information where to allow the pilot to make a educated decision as to whether or not to actually take off.
Thank you very much for your analysis. Aviation analyst, Captain Desmond Ross, appreciate your time.